Have you ever wondered why some rooms feel twice their actual size? It's not magic, it's good design. Okay, say it with me, good design. From furniture scale and color to lighting and layout. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some tricks that you can apply into your home to create the illusion of a bigger space. And yes, I know some people will tell you the secret is simple, just own less stuff. Decluttering definitely helps, but there are still some more tricks that you need to apply to your next renovation. Now this is one of those simple choices that completely changes how large or cramped your space feels. Floors with small tiles add detail and pattern, but with all those broad lines and small squares, your brain reads more segments, which makes a space feel busier and sometimes smaller. But with big tiles, they do the total opposite. They usually make a space feel larger because there are fewer broad lines breaking up the floor. Your eye reads it as one continuous surface, which creates calm and openness. And this is because fewer visual interruptions make a space feel more expansive. You see the surfaces on continuous unbroken surface, which allows the eye to follow across it and perceive the space as large and more cohesive. For example, a room with a continuous floor with no visual breaks will feel larger and more expansive than the space finished with small mosaic tiles because the uninterrupted surface creates a stronger sense of openness and cohesion. And it doesn't matter whether it's tiles, carpet, or wood, the principle always stays the same. Yes. Okay. So if you want to make your space feel bigger and you have control over the floor finish, always go for bigger surfaces and keep the visual lines to a minimum. If you're using tiles, matching the ground color to the tiles helps the visual lines disappear even more. Fewer visual breaks create a more open, unified, and elevated living space to create a much cleaner and continuous look. Direction is just as important as material size. The way you lay your flooring can completely change how your space feels. Even when using the exact same tile, different layering patterns can make a room feel larger, wider, longer, or more dynamic. This is a great trick for small rooms like bathrooms and entrance areas because these rooms tend to feel a little tighter. A diagonal tile layout can help visually expand the space and make it feel more open and inviting. When flooring is laid in a diagonal pattern, it can make a room feel larger because the lines run at an angle rather than parallel to the walls. Your eye travels further across the room, making the space feel larger and more open than it actually is. The diagonal lines visually stretch the room's boundaries, creating a greater sense of width. Laying the planks horizontally helps visually stretch the space, making it feel wider and preventing the walls from feeling like they're closing in. And laying the planks vertically emphasizes the length of the room. While this can create a strong sense of depth, it can also exaggerate how long and narrow the space feels. Horizontal flooring tends to balance the proportions, making the room feel more comfortable, open, and visually wider. So far, we have manipulated the width, length, and floor space. Now let's see how we can create the illusion of height. Vertical lines are one of those oldest tricks in the design book. Whether it's wall paneling, wallpaper, timber slats, or even curtains, vertical elements draw the eye upwards, making ceilings appear taller and the room to feel more spacious. Vertical lines can dramatically change the perceived height of a space. That's because vertical elements naturally draw the eye upwards, making us believe the room is taller than it actually is. Floor-to-ceiling curtains, vertical wall paneling, timber slats, and striped wallpaper all create the illusion of higher ceilings by encouraging your eye to travel upwards. Think about a small apartment with a 2.5mm ceiling height. If the curtains start and end at the window frame, the eye stops at the top of the window, making the ceiling feel lower and the room more compressed. By extending the curtains all the way to the ceiling and down to the floor, you visually stretch the room, creating the impression of a taller and more spacious room. At night, up lighting can have a similar impact by directing light up walls. Plants or architectural features, you create visual beams of light that guide the eye towards the ceiling, further enhancing the perception of height and openness. Color is one of the most important tools in interior design, so it makes sense why people tend to overthink it. Should I go for Plascon, Beige Ballade, or Oriental Magic? For light, and when the light bounces around a room, it visually pushes walls and ceilings upward, making the space feel brighter, larger, and more open. Dark colors do the total opposite. They absorb light. This causes surfaces to feel closer, creating a more intimate and enclosed atmosphere. Now, don't get me wrong, dark colors are beautiful and sexy. They create incredibly moody, sophisticated, and cozy spaces. But if your objective is to make your space feel larger, dark colors are not your friend. Instead, option for lighter wall paint colors and consider painting your ceiling an even lighter shade than your walls. This creates a subtle gradient that draws the eye upward and enhances the perception of height. Dark ceilings bring a room down and light ceilings lift it up. Botox! A darker ceiling color will visually pull the ceiling downward, making the room feel shorter and more enclosed. This can be a great design strategy if you live in a space with unusual high ceilings and want to create a more intimate and comfortable atmosphere. However, if you already have a low ceiling, the goal is usually the opposite. Keep the ceiling a lighter color than the walls, so lighter ceilings reflect more light and appear to recede upward, creating the illusion of additional height and making the room feel more open and airy. If paint feels a little too boring for you and you're a wallpaper person, there are still ways that you can make your room feel larger. I would generally keep the scale of the pattern fairly small. Large bold patterns tend to dominate a room. They create strong focal points that the eye immediately locks onto, which can make walls feel closer and the space more enclosed. Smaller, more delicate patterns work differently. They add visual interest without overwhelming the room, helping to maintain an open and airy feeling. You still get texture, character, and personality, but without sacrificing the sense of space. It's not just about pattern that matters, it's about pattern scale, color, and contrast. The same rules about dark and light colors apply to wallpaper as well. A dark wallpaper, even with a small scale pattern, will generally make a room feel smaller because it absorbs light and visually pulls the walls inward. A light color wallpaper with soft, subtle patterns reflects more light and helps maintain a sense of openness. When it comes to making your room feel larger, the weight of your furniture matters less than its visual weight. One of the easiest ways to reduce weight is by choosing elevated furniture pieces with visible legs rather than furniture that sits directly on the floor with solid legs. When you can see underneath a piece, it appears light, less dominant, and takes up less visual space. Now let's compare the two bedrooms of exactly the same size. One is filled with chunky, solid furniture that extends all the way to the floor. The room immediately feels heavier and more crowded, and as though the furniture is consuming the space. On the left, it's the same room with a bed on slim, elevated legs. Even if the dimensions are identical, the bed feels lighter because you can see the floor beneath it. The room suddenly has more breathing room and feels more spacious. While floating furniture and exposed legs can make a room feel lighter, too many leggy pieces can create visual clutter. If every item has thin legs and exposed structure, the room can start to feel busy and fragmented. In your small room, I'll focus on making the largest furniture pieces visually light. Smaller pieces can be a bit more solid and grounded. The goal isn't to put everything on legs, it's to strategically lighten the pieces that have the biggest impact on the room. For example, in your bedroom, you might choose a bed with visible legs because it's the largest and most dominant piece of furniture in the room. By lifting it off the floor, the space feels lighter and more open. Your bedside tables and ottomans, however, can be a little bit more solid and grounded. They don't need the same visual lightness because they're smaller pieces and have less impact on how spacious the room feels. The same principle applies in a living room. The sofa is usually the largest piece of furniture, so it's a good candidate for a lighter visual appearance. The coffee table and armchairs can then be a bit more solid, creating balance and preventing the room from feeling overly delicate and cluttered. It's about identifying the dominant furniture piece in the room and reducing its visual weight. Even when you're choosing furniture with visible legs, you don't necessarily want it sitting too high off the ground. In many cases, lower profile furniture can make a room feel larger and more spacious. Furniture that sits closer to the floor increases the amount of visual wall above it. This creates a longer visual journey from the floor to the ceiling, which can make the room feel taller than it actually is. So think about it. When you walk into a room with low profile furniture, your eye has more uninterrupted wall surface to travel across. Sometimes making a room feel larger isn't about physically raising the ceiling, it's about lowering what's underneath it. I love a good rug, not because it feels good underneath my feet. Well, that's the main reason. Who doesn't love a good rug? A large rug helps unify a room by visually connecting the furniture and creating one cohesive zone. Instead of seeing individual pieces scattered throughout the space, your eye reads them as part of a single composition. Larger rugs also help extend the room visually. which can make a room feel bigger and more open. Small rugs tend to break a room up. Each rug creates its own visual zone, and when your eye reads multiple separate areas, the space can start to feel busier, smaller, and more fragmented. I'm thirsty. Way too much talking. In fact, I'm hungry. By now, you're probably seeing the recurring theme. The less visual interruptions there are, the larger a room tends to feel. This principle works across almost every room in the home. Living rooms, dining rooms, and bedrooms. In a living room, a larger rug helps connect the sofa, coffee table, and chairs into one cohesive arrangement. So when you're deciding between two rug sizes and you're unsure which one to choose, always go bigger. Your rug should unite the room and not divide it. One of the simplest ways to make a room feel larger is to simplify your wall decor. Rather than filling a wall with lots of small frames, consider choosing one large piece of artwork. A single statement piece creates a strong focal point without overwhelming the space. Now, don't get me wrong, no. Spaces filled with personal photographs, artwork, and collected memories can feel incredibly charming and full of character. But that's not what we're trying to achieve in this video, no. A larger artwork creates visual interruptions, allowing your eye to move across the wall more effortlessly. The result is calmer and more spacious feeling. But when your wall is covered in lots of small frames, your eye jumps from one piece to the next. It's visually stimulating, but it's also visually noisy. All those frames, edges, and gaps create multiple stopping points, which can make a room feel busier and ultimately smaller. So if your goal is to make a room feel larger, cleaner, and more elevated, reducing visual clutter is key. If you try to make your room feel bigger, simplify your wall decor. One large piece of art will often have a much greater impact than several smaller pieces competing for attention. Mirrors are fantastic, they are amazing, they are magic, okay? Everybody needs a mirror. You must have a mirror. Mirrors are one of the most powerful tools for making a room feel larger because they reflect light, extend sight lines, and create the illusion of depth. Where it can reflect natural light back into the room and create the illusion of second view, instantly the space feels brighter and more open. But here's the thing, mirrors reflect everything, the good, the bad, and the worst. So first, establish clear side lines and minimize clutter before adding a mirror. Beautiful view, a clean wall, a styled corner, or some greenery. Or is it a pile of shoes, codes, keys, cables, and everyday clutter? For example, if your hallway is a drop zone for keys, bags, umbrellas, and jackets, I probably wouldn't place a mirror directly opposite that area. The last thing you want is to double the visual chaos every time you walk through the space. So position mirrors where they reflect something that adds to the room, natural light, artwork, plants, or a clean and calming view. Think of a mirror as a spotlight. Whatever it reflects becomes more noticeable. A mirror doesn't create space, it creates the perception of space. The trick is making sure that it's reflecting the right things. Internal glazing. Ooh, okay, now this design trick can be an absolute game changer when used correctly. Replacing solid walls or doors with glass panels, internal windows, or glazed partitions, you can visually connect separate rooms while still maintaining a physical boundary between them. One of the biggest advantages of internal glazing is that it allows light to travel through the home. Whether you choose clear or frosted glass, you're giving light a pathway into areas that might not normally receive natural daylight. For example, if you have a dark hallway adjacent to a bright living room, introducing internal glazing can allow light to spill into the hallway, instantly making it feel brighter, larger, and more inviting. The same principle applies to the doors. That solid door separating your kitchen from your dining room, does it really need to be solid? Internal glazing is very useful in studio apartments and smaller homes. If your kitchen feels completely closed off from the rest of the apartment, adding an internal window or glazed partition can help the space feel more open without sacrificing functionality. What makes this strategy so effective is that it removes visual barriers while keeping physical ones. Your eye can travel further through the space while making your home feel larger and more connected. Walls stop people and glass lets the eye keep moving. Thank you.